There we go. Now we're live. Hello. All right, now this is the postmortem that I do. We played D&D last Thursday. ? Yeah, and I'm just trying to keep this weekly kind of tabs on what's happening and kind of a good way to keep my own thoughts in order, as well as possibly revealing some of my tips or secrets to anybody who might be interested in DMing for a game of Dungeons & Dragons. Very classic edition. I also gossip about my players, and they have a tendency to show up whenever I'm doing that because they're bastards and they just have to know. And yeah, so I'm just going to jump right into it. A quick recap. Players get involved in some kind of dark, horrible ritual. They get branded. The city that they're native to gets attacked by an army, and they're kind of forced to band together to escape and get the hell out of Dodge. They get to the nearby city that one of the players is actually from, and there they kind of get a little bit more information on what their issue is, and they determine that we can't get captured by the Inquisition, which is the anti-magic police force of my setting. To that effect, they're now just trying to figure out where to go next, and in addition to that, how are they going to get money? And so they immediately strike upon this idea of accepting an offer from a friend of theirs, Colonel Carter Copperbell, who's the Riverboat Corps captain, who seems to have taken a liking to them and is offering a job in the woods to go and kill some, hags, take care of the hag problem. And that's been pretty good for them so far. The last 2 sessions have just been a dungeon crawl. The first real dungeon crawl we've done in the game. So that was kind of exciting. It was a little bit stressful at first, just because I wanted to make sure that the players knew what they were getting into ahead of time. And normally I don't like to do that. I like people to be surprised. But in this case, I wanted to be clear with them kind of the style of the game. So I told them straight up, this is a dungeon. He'll give you 1,000 gold if you complete it. And it's up to you guys to accept or decline. And they decided that they're going to accept it. So we went through the first few scenarios in the dungeon in the last session. They got to the forest. And even though it's a forest and it's an environment that's like grass and woods and trees, it's still a dungeon, and it's still organized into rooms, quote unquote. I have index cards, and each one is woods part 1, woods part 2. They had an encounter of simply trying to survive the woods in the sense of survival and tracking. And that was the first instance of actually doing some rolls that might fail. So we had some people rolling survival to follow blood splatter through the forest. They had some perception checks to see if something funky was happening. We had some arcana checks to find and dispel some talismans that were making the forest unnaturally dark. And a little mini boss. We had Bogart Redcap, who is a recurring NPC. He's a goblin chieftain. And he just comes through every now and then and seems to be doing his own thing, and then just interacts with the players. Intersects with what the players want. Or don't want. Rather. And they beat them pretty handily. That was pretty easy. I think I already talked about this last session, so I won't linger too much on it. So they had that as a mini boss essentially, and they pressed further in. They had an NPC that they rescued from the goblins, Tortle, which is fun RP. It's just an RP encounter to shake it up. It's important to have dungeons still have RP and puzzle solving and characters to find and NPCs to talk to. Because that's kind of, some people build their characters around talking with NPCs and being good at persuasion or charisma in general. So you still have to enable that kind of character. The bards and the warlocks and the paladins and stuff like that. And maybe sorcerers. I'm not really quite sure what they stat into. But we continue forward. It gets kind of spooky, and this is the part where I have a lot of fun as the DM, kind of shaking things up. Not all my encounters are pulled from the monster manual. This is as the DM, you kind of got to curate your own experience, and I like there to be a little bit some spooky, scary stuff. So they find what looks to be a haunted wood mill, like a sawmill. Along a creek in the woods after having some strange encounters with the evil crows and a dark thing in the water that spooked them and almost pulled them in. And I did not roll initiative for any of those things, and I don't think any of the players wanted to roll initiative. This is one of those things where I think I did a good job describing the situation and really painting that thing in the water, whatever it was, some kind of monster that was going to get them, who knows. But they were we wanted us to keep going through the water rather than go through the spooky mill. I knew they were going to have to go through the spooky mill. They wanted to go through the water, but there was something in the water, and that was a lot of fun. I really described it in a way that I think none of the players even expected, this is an encounter for us to fight this thing, because it wasn't. It was just a puzzle, essentially, of trying not to get eaten, and ignore it. Maybe they would have been able to roll really well and get some added insight. I like to make room for the dice to decide what happens, but that didn't happen. So I'm not going to worry about what coulda, shoulda, woulda. The players continue into the mill, and they have runes etched on the sides of the walls and stuff like that. And that's kind of where the last session ended and this session began. And I really got to admit that this upcoming summary is going to be a little bit on the quick side, just because it was a lot of combat, and while it was interesting and fun, I'm not going to go blow by blow, narrating and going through everything that happened. It would just be a waste of time, and also not very interesting to hear summarized. It was fun to play, but not fun to summarize. But they go inside and just start exploring. They find an office off to the side with a vault underneath it, a small safe, and they debate like, oh, can we open it? Can we crack it? They roll, like Brookhild rolls to try and open it with intelligence, and she rolls pretty good, but everything takes time, and she didn't, it wasn't a critical success. And she would have popped that bad boy open in 30 seconds. But I kind of, the game is about risk and deciding whether or not you want to take certain risks. So I told them straight up, this was the risk, was she can definitely open it. It'll just take about 20 minutes, maybe longer. So if you want to take the time to open it, then yes, the contents will be yours. But do you want to take 20 minutes to open it? And so they kind of have to just think about that. And I try not to do that too many times to the players, because I notice that it creates a paralysis where they spend like 20 minutes just thinking about whether or not they want to spend 20 minutes to open certain stuff. Depending on the situation. So I try not to do that too harshly. But that, it only took a few seconds of them trying to figure it out. Originally, Brookhill was probably not going to bother with it until she noticed that, the other players were like, well, we want to know what's in the safe. So if your character's not going to go and open it, then we're going to try and break it open. And so that was kind of like an ultimatum for Brookhill. It wasn't meant in a mean way. It was just kind of this sort of like, well, the other two players want to know what's inside, and if they can't roll intelligence to do it, then they're going to try and break it open. And I had them roll athletics and attack actions, and they're just like beating open the safe. And eventually Brookfield's like, all right, fine, yes, they'll try to open it with 20 minutes spent. Meanwhile, Gareth probes deeper into the wood mill, and it's spooky, it's scary. There's runes etched in on the walls and on the thresholds of doors. There's supplies and stuff. Like, it looks like everybody just kind of up and left in the middle of working. They recover a few items like carpenter's tools, and I described some tools around that I didn't really think the players were going to want to have. Like, it wasn't intended to be like treasure. It was just something that was supposed to be like conveying the scene, which was a little bit difficult because I had no way to quantify it in a game mechanical term. So I was like, well, there's wood axes here, and if you wanted to take one, I guess it could function like a battle axe. But it just kind of caused confusion, because then one player was like, wait, there's battle axes here? Why are there and it was like, no, they're just wood axes, and I just don't know how to quantify them to you as a tool that might be useful to you, because I didn't expect them to be useful to you. They were just tools that were left behind by people who were leaving in a hurry. So there's a lot of stuff like that where it's just like tools left around, knives maybe. I think Valerie picked up like a knife, a whittling knife essentially on the side. That was partially because I wanted to help replace the knife that she left earlier, or kind of threw away earlier in an attempt to explore some kind of black ooze, which is what would happen. But I didn't feel good about it necessarily. Yes, it would have eaten your knife. No, I don't feel good about it. So have a backup knife. So yeah, she took a knife. But they explored around a little bit more. There's an upstairs to this mill. There's a bigger workshop room to this mill. Gareth finds a long hallway, and that's when it starts to get even more spooky. There's just blood all across the floor and along the walls of this hallway, and it terminates in a locked door. And this was kind of the adventure test, where it was what will they do when they see it's like a 15-foot long hallway, and it's just covered in blood, like The Shining. Like, at the end of this hallway is the elevator door from The Shining opening up, and blood is splattered everywhere. And I mean, it could have been really bad, depending on what kind of DM you had. That might have been like a very obvious, like, wee-oo, don't go down this hallway. But to me, it was just a test. It was just a test to see what kind of level of courage, resolve, what do they expect from this game? When they see a long bloody hallway and a locked door at the end, what do they do with it? And I wasn't going to punish them one way or another, or necessarily reward them in one way or another. I didn't necessarily want to incentivize any one form of play. I wanted them to incentivize me as to what kind of play they wanted to experience. And that's the real reason that existed. But the story-related is, well, there's something occult on the other side. They can know, they can tell. But it's a very thickly, well-defended door. It's like some kind of safe room of some kind. And so once again, we come back to the situation of someone rolls athletics to see if they can break the door down, essentially. And they get an okay number, and that basically just tells me as a DM, like, yeah, it's possible for you to do this. It's just going to take some time. You're going to have to go grab one of those axes, and you're going to have to go beat this door down for, like, maybe an hour. And it's up to you guys to decide if you want to spend that much time here. And it's fun. I think that's more interesting than a pass or fail necessarily, because there's some situations where I don't think that it makes sense that your character wouldn't be able to do this. Like, it seems within realm and reason. It's just it'd be very hard, but anything is accomplished with enough time. And I don't really like it when players are like, well, I'll just try again. I'll just roll again. Because it's like, no, you can't. You can't just roll again. You can't roll forever until you succeed on something. There's some situations where you can. I feel like lockpick sort of falls into that situation. I feel like players and DMs are more likely to just let the thief try again over and over and over again until they succeed. And sometimes the DM wants the players to succeed because, sure, something might be locked, and it's because the character or the NPC or the bad guy doesn't want the players to have it, and it wouldn't make sense if it wasn't locked. But the DM does want that door unlocked because of what's on the other side is for the players, and the story must continue. In which case, I feel like DMs maybe we can do a better job of putting. If you're not ready for the player to fail and have a lose condition, then don't bother to have them roll, in my opinion. But I think a good happy medium for me is like, yeah, you can do it. It's just going to take some time. And that's more time for weird shit to happen or encounters, bad, monsters to roll up on you. Or maybe if time is of the essence, you're trying to rescue the princess. Do you have an hour to kill? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. It's for the players to decide. I like it when the players have control over the situation, at least in how much risk do they want to take. But they decide, yeah, okay, Gareth is going to take the next hour or so and knock down this fucking door. So he picks up an axe and starts going to work, and the rest of the party kind of takes that as like, all right, well, I guess we're short resting or maybe even long resting. The day is growing darker. I think it really was like twilight. Time was hard to keep track of in the woods, even for the DM, but it was like, it's getting to nighttime. Like, they've been traveling for hours at that point. It was like, they got there mid-afternoon, 7 hours at 7 o'clock at night, time for bed. So they start bedding up at camp. They put out their tent and they set up a little fire like in the workshop, which was really cool and interesting. It was nice imagery to see them kind of like in my mind's eye, sitting in this workshop and kind of having fun. Not fun necessarily, but roughing it, like creaky branches outside. It felt like being in a haunted house. It was cool and it was interesting. And eventually Gareth does break down the door after like an hour and a half. But in the meantime, a lot of stuff gets done. Valerie recovers another knife. She does a little investigating, and I have a roll insight, and I'm like, yeah, it seems like a really nice knife to just leave behind. And so it's kind of a spooky situation. A strange light passes through the window, and it shines down like the moon. And at first I thought it was the moon, but it was like moving in the sky, and it's like a spotlight coming through the window, and so they all like hide for a second. And that was really dramatic and interesting, and they didn't know what to make of it. I knew what it was, but I'm not going to tell everybody just yet on the stream, even though it is supposed to be a summary, because there's some interesting stuff with that. But that passes by, and it's a lot of opportunities for stuff to happen that doesn't immediately have a resolution. Either it doesn't break into a fight, they don't solve it immediately. It's just some weird mystery. It's part of a clue. It's something to wonder about for a few minutes or maybe an hour or maybe until next session or beyond. It's just a way that I like. Nothing has answers all the time. It's a fantasy world, and nothing is necessarily abiding by rules. So that was fun and interesting. I don't think anything else happens in that time until Gareth breaks down the door. He eventually cuts through it. I describe like you finally chop through this thing, and you've basically been less chopping down a door and more digging through a door. It's so thick; it's like a 5-inch thick door. So it's like between 3 and 5 inches of heavy oak planks. And so he's like just like chiseling out one little splinter at a time, trying to break through it. But he eventually does, and on the other side, he tries to peep through. And they're adventurers, they're risk adverse, and so they're like, oh well, I want to peek and see, and I have dark vision, and a lot of I became very pink all of a sudden. That was cool. But yeah, they're risk adverse, which is fine. I don't want him to take any risky things. But he looks through. We talk about dark vision for a minute or two. I never really understand how dark vision works. It's simultaneously more powerful and less powerful than I give it credit for at the exact same time. It's very strange. It's like anything that would be dark is instead just dim for like 60 feet. So you can see up to 60 feet essentially in dark light as if it's dim. I think that's how it works. Which implies that it's not as powerful as I think it is. But then when you read the description to me, it basically just sounded like you can see like absolutely normal. I think the only downside is that you can't see color, but I've never had a situation where that is actually important. Unless I come up with like good guy and bad guy factions that wear the exact same clothes, except one's green and one's red. But until I do that, I don't really know what else to do with that information besides just be like, all right, well, I can see in the dark up to 60 feet, and nothing's on the other side of the door. You see a desk, and there's definitely spooky things in there. You see like something in jars. You see like paintings on the wall and something hanging from a meat hook. And really, that's just hint of like nobody inside is moving. There's no entity. That's kind of really all that Gareth cares about. This is really all that any player cares about when they're reconning ahead of time. Is there someone inside? And the answer is no. Not from what you can see. So they chop the door down the rest of the way and pop inside. And yeah, it's a spooky occult room. There's like a pentagram drawn on the wall, and on the ground there's a desk with like a vertebrae in a jar and floating. There's like organs and stuff like that. There's a bookshelf with all kinds of like strange water damaged scrolls and books. A few of them are still intact. And there's like talismans hanging from the ceiling. And I think Brookehill used detect magic, and Gareth recognizes these talismans from earlier in the woods. It was hanging in the trees beforehand, and so he's like, screw that magic. I'm going to take that and rip it down. And that's a trap, is what that is. Anybody who interacts with it and breaks the twine, it casts a spell on them. It casts a spell at like 4th level or 5th level or something like that. I just say, like, what's your total hit points? And he goes, uh-oh. And obviously that sounds scary on paper, but the reason why I ask him what his total hit points is because that a talisman casts sleep, which doesn't do any damage. It's not meant to kill you. It's not going to one shot you or anything like that. It's just sleep. I described Gareth pulling down the first talisman, and nothing happens because I rolled the 8d8s or whatever it is, and it does not beat his maximum hit points. So he does not fall asleep, and then he goes to the next one, kind of self-assured that like, oh, nothing happened the last time, and he pulls it down, and now it does beat his HP, and he goes down. I describe him as falling unconscious, falling face first, essentially, in the mid-sentence, which is funny, and it helped take the edge off. Sometimes I want it to be funny. Sometimes I want it to be kind of like more comical when things happen, and it's not because I'm trying to take the piss out on the player or anything like that. I'm not trying to make fun of them. I'm not trying to play a joke on them at their expense. It's because it helps establish that the situation is not life-threatening, and I don't want them to freak out unnecessarily, because there'll be times to freak out, especially like when that moonbeam thing was going through the window and peeking in, and like the spotlight was shining down. That was something that I was like, you guys should roll stealth, and like you should try to hide and not be seen by that. But this was a situation where it's a spooky room, yeah, but it was kind of like, oh, congratulations, you spent an hour in here, you guys had the bravery to go down the blood-soaked hallway, and that's not always going to end in good things. So yeah, you guys have some opportunity to kind of explore. But Gareth goes down, Azarine comes in as well, Brookhill's kind of like detecting magic, Valerie's kind of like taking a step back, and Azarine sees one of the talismans, and she just tries to examine it very closely, and she's like, well, I'm not going to break it or anything. But unfortunately for her, the trick for whether or not something casts sleep, the trap goes off, just had to do with undoing the twine that kept it hung up. It had nothing to do with breaking the talisman. So when the twine gets broken and she unties it, I mean, you didn't need to break it violently. It was literally just like unhooking it from the wall. Like just any kind of interaction would make it cause sleep. So Azarine it also falls unconscious, which was, it was fun. It wasn't supposed to be scary. It wasn't supposed to be super. It was just supposed to be like, obviously this is some place that you shouldn't be. Someone had some stuff to defend, but not a deadly degree. It was just, once again, like it kind of comes back to that the lockpick question, where it's like, yeah, it makes sense that the bad guy would put this thing behind a locked door, but I still want the party to be able to break in as the DM. So yeah, I want the party to be able to explore this room, but I don't want the traps to kill them, so it just casts sleep. And if there's an in-story justification for it beyond the out-of-story justification of there needs to be traps here to make this a believable situation, but not so deadly as to kill the players, because that's what the hags are for. But that's it was just they're gonna cast sleep, and it's like at a 5th level, so it's pretty strong sleep spell. But it's, in my opinion, it's easy to make somebody fall asleep. Like in the grand scheme of things, a high-level sleep spell is not that powerful, really, not compared to an equivalent level spell like a fireball or whatever like that. I feel like a mage could easier cast sleep than fireball, and I think I'm backed up by the rules, because I don't think every caster can learn fireball, but I think most can learn sleep. But either way, this is my setting, and I can do what I want. It's my setting. I can do what I want. But yeah, the other two remaining awake people kind of just like slowly explore the rest of the room. Brookehild finds a few spell tomes off the wall. I think I described them as like containing possible spells if she just takes the time to learn them and transcribe them. I don't remember what Pact of the Tome sorcerers can do. I think Pact of the Tome warlocks can do. I think it just means that you can pick spells from other people's spells lists. I don't know if it necessarily means that you can learn spells from stuff you find in the world. But I don't. This is my world once again, and I can do what I want with it. So like, I have homebrewed scrolls and I have homebrewed tomes, and I tell her like, if you will take the time, it might take weeks, it might take months, but if you want to learn the spells that are kept within these tomes, then there are spells in these tomes for your spellcaster to learn. I don't care if you're a wizard. It also had some information on the hags, that they're going to be, it's local lore and interesting stuff like that. And that was a lot of fun. It was once again an RP encounter. It's something that even though this is a dungeon, technically the whole forest is a dungeon. But it's still full of things that aren't necessarily just 4 rooms, 4 walls, with a bunch of enemies to kill. It's important for your dungeons to have RP stuff. It's important to have puzzles. It's important to have stuff that's, not always just fighting everything all the time, or just going from room to room clearing a bunch of enemies. That's fun in a video game, and it can be fun if you have the right kind of mindset as a player, but I don't think it's fun for most people. Nor would it be fun for the people that I've pulled in, and that's not the kind of game that I want to run, because I wouldn't have fun necessarily running that kind of dungeon. So this dungeon this is room 4 or 5 or whatever, and the room is the whole wood mill that they're exploring, this old sawmill on the side of the creek. So she gets some reward. It's treasure, essentially. And in the desk, they find some kind of strange box, and inside is an eye on a pendant. And anybody who might be a veteran D&D player might know that that's a hag eye. But they don't know what that is. And I didn't expect them to. If someone did know what that was, I would have been fine letting them RP the act of, oh, I've heard rumor about that, and them telling the rest of the party about that. But nobody knew what that was, which was fine, because the information was in one of the books that Brookehild bought. Or not bought, she found. So that information was going to get revealed, but they find it. It's creepy. It's weird. If I had a mind at the time to have them roll wisdom saving throws right then and there by looking at the eye, not necessarily because of any other reason besides that would kind of let them know that there's something spooky about that eyeball on a pendant. And the what the hag eye does for us as the audience, now that we're out, this is the summary. What the hag eye does is hags, especially in a coven, have the ability to create an artifact, a hag eye, and they usually give it to a minion, and the hags can use an action to see through that pendant as if it's their own eye. And it's kind of like the way a familiar works. In my opinion, though, whoever put that in the box obviously didn't want to be seen by any hags, and so the hags probably gave up on that eye a long time ago. So they weren't ready to look through that eye when the adventurers come across this box and open it. It's not like immediate, like, ha ha, I see you. Would have had no reason to know that the hag eye was necessary. Maybe they had an inkling. Hags in my game are a little bit on the mystical side, really weird. They're like Baba Yagas out in the woods. They have all kinds of weird shit, and maybe even some sixth senses of various kinds. So they probably knew. They did know. When someone unearthed the eye, they were aware. They knew that someone had found it again, but they didn't necessarily have the immediate reaction of them to look through it, and because they closed it pretty quick. Anyway, but they take the eye, they take the other stuff, they wake up their party members. I described them like just Brookehild like, oh, I kicked Gareth on the way by, and I had her roll damage, and she was kind of like, well, I don't want to kick him that hard, and Gareth was like, well, she probably can't even hit me through my AC, but it wasn't about that. It was about that, oh, well, if they take damage, then the sleep spell wears off, and up until now, they didn't know what spell had been cast on Gareth and Azarine, even though we know that it's sleep. Of course it's sleep. What else would it be? But they didn't necessarily know. So that was one of those instances where I was kind of making her roll on purpose, because it was like, well, you're about to solve the puzzle, right? You're about to wake them up, essentially. All you have to do is take an action to wake them up, or they take damage. And I thought it'd be interesting if, like, Gareth getting kicked in the side by Brookehild in frustration would be what woke him up, essentially. True love's kiss, except it's a boot to the head. So yeah, it was interesting. But yeah, they eventually wake everybody up and they go into the room, and their plan is to bed down for the night to take a long rest. And so I asked Gareth, like, do you sleep in your armor? And there's some negative effects to sleeping in the armor in previous editions of D&D, but it turns out that now that I've looked at it, apparently there's literally no downside in regular 5th edition D&D for sleeping in your armor, which is very, I don't know. I'm a little disappointed, to be honest with you. I kind of assumed that, like, sleeping in armor would be some kind of fun ritual of a test of risk. Do you want to sleep in your armor and risk exhaustion, or do you want to sleep in your armor and make sure that you be defended? Do you want to be defended in the night if something goes wrong? Or so I thought that was interesting, and it turns out that there is no rule in the basic player's handbook thing that enables that, unfortunately. So I was a little disappointed to find out that it actually doesn't do damn shit. But oh well. I mean, in Xanathar's guide, I did look up. It turns out that if you sleep in heavy armor or medium armor, you only recover half as much hit die as you normally would, or half of half, essentially, is what it comes down to. At 1/4 your maximum, which is still a downside in this game, especially when that's basically the only reason anyone would long rest in my setting, because long resting does not recover HP at all. It just doesn't recover HP. It only recovers your spell slots and your hit die, or half your total, rather. So him sleeping in heavy armor is like, I mean, I'm trying to play this game by the rules, but I am also planning on using the rules that I think are fun and interesting and create the style of game I'd like to play, and I'm trying to have a more risk. I want journeys to matter. I want long resting in the wilderness to be possible, but also risky. I want seeing civilization or building an encampment or finding some place that seems more well defended than just sleeping in an open field in the middle of the woods to matter. So I want there to be some kind of level of risk to like sleeping in your heavy armor and stuff like that. And I see a bunch of people online that are like, well, I mean, you know, if you were out in the wilderness, you'd sleep in your armor because it would make you feel more well defended. And there's plenty of situations in the past of medieval fighters and warriors and knights sleeping in their armor. And it's like, it's not comfy. It's not comfy. Like you're not going to be able to convince me that it's not like I'm kind of basing his armor off of like Roman centurion armor, and they did not sleep in that. Like they just didn't. The experiences that people have of sleeping in armor, like yeah, that is noted in historical texts, but it's like doublets. It's like doublets and jerkins, which are made out of like leather and cotton and wool. They're just padded jackets anyway, or they're wearing like hauberks out of chainmail, which are very comfortable, and I think chainmail is a very underrated form of armor. But that is yeah, I would sleep in chainmail, sure. I guess that's comfy enough, but I'm not sleeping in plate mail. Fuck you. I don't think sleeping in plate mail is reasonable. Not really. I mean, you can take a shot, but I'd have him roll Constitution against exhaustion and stuff like that. Apparently, the only rule, though, is that he just recovers 1/4 hit die. So I'll talk to him about that, to be honest. That's one of those things where it's like, hey, listen, apparently you deserve a buff because the rules say so, and I'll play it by the rules, or we can keep doing it as the way it is. What makes you have more fun? Because sometimes the players are like, yeah, I want the challenge. You know, it makes it feel more realistic. It makes it feel more gritty or whatever. Just as long as it matches what they want in their heads and what I want in my head, that's all that kind of really matters. As long as I have fun running it and they have fun playing it, then that's all that matters. But getting back to the adventure, they decide to do the long rest, and this is where they start kind of like going to the books that they have and the treasures. I think they found some like rubies and stuff like that. They opened up the safe and it had some papers inside, as well as like 200 silver pieces or something like that. I'm trying to use silver pieces more now that I realize that a silver piece is actually not just 1/100th of a gold piece. Apparently it's only 1/10, which is a much bigger increment than I thought it was. But on top of that, silver is actually turning out to be more useful in the setting than I thought. I will admit that when I first started, it seemed like everything was measured in gold, but the more I looked at what you can buy, like with equipment, and what might be useful to the players and like food and rations, it turns out it's more well balanced than I thought. Especially with the whole you have to buy your next level up with gold mechanic in my setting. I feel like that immediately makes the players feel a little bit more like money's precious. But it's pretty well balanced so far. So they find some money, they're counting out their treasures, they're playing some games amongst each other to try and figure out who gets the rubies. There's only 2, but 3 of them want it, so they're playing a game of cards. And that was a fun role-playing encounter. It was very interesting. And we kind of have this homebrew rule of if you're playing a card game or any kind of game, I'll let you, it's either an intelligence check or a wisdom check, your choice. And if you have proficiency in that game, then you get to add your proficiency bonus. And that seems to be a fun way of just playing a basic game very quickly on a long rest for fun. It's over really quickly. It might be fun to make up more little game like mechanics for playing stuff like that. Maybe we could literally play a game of liar's dice on Roll20 in theory. But that would take a long time. That's meant to be played in real life and be entertaining, and playing a game within a game can only get so entertaining. So it's nice to have that kind of be resolved really quickly just with the competition of dice, and they can decide for themselves if they want to do best 2 out of 3 or something and make it longer. If they're having fun, then by all means. But that was fun. That was interesting. Brookehild goes through her books, and I think they take out the Haggai again. And I think I only say I think because I don't remember the exact order to everything, but I know it all made sense at the time. But I think what amounted to is that they take out the Haggai again, and at this point, the hags are looking through it, and they're kind of waiting to see like who's coming, who's around, and so when they pop it open, everyone kind of is seen in the room. And I have Brookehild kind of roll a perception check or some kind of check just to see if she notices that the eye kind of like quickly like looks at her real quickly, real quick, like just like I was kind of thinking like the god egg or whatever it's called, the Bahillit I think it is from Berserk, how it, like the eyeball on it will just like open really quick and look at you and then go back to being inert. So that was fun and that was interesting. But it was at that point that it was like, the hags have seen basically the whole party. They know that they're coming, and I don't think the party did not know this, but the hags, me as the DM, the hags know that now the party is there. At least they know a few of them. But then I have Brookehild roll a wisdom saving throw because the hags know scrying, which is a spell that is super rare in my setting because it's a low magic setting. But I mean, all of the monsters know whatever spells it is they know, and that's what makes them monsters. That's what makes them powerful. They don't play by the same rules as the players. They never have. They never will. They don't even in the regular Monster Hunter, the regular monster manual. They don't play by the same rules as the player. But yeah, that was fun and interesting. And she rolled and she failed. And basically that means that the hags are able to project like a security camera within like 10 or 20 feet of Brookehild for the next 10 minutes. And so for the next 10 minutes of their conversation, they are able to see. And they by being able to see Brookehild, they kind of get like a hook on her. Through the Haggai. That's what it was. The Haggai only saw Brookehild, but that's all that they needed. They just needed to see Brookehild, and they could cast scrying. And once they did, they were able to look around with their scrying eye around the room, and they were able to see everyone and count how many they were and see where they were. And then that was going to be what bad stuff happened. But they did learn. Brookehild looked at it and looked through her books, and these arcane books that she just found had some stuff on hags. And there's a story to this woodmill. Like something happened in this woodmill, and there was NPCs, and there were more clues to find out. But it doesn't really matter, and I don't care if they ever piece it together. All that matters is that to me it was realistic and felt real and all made sense, because then the players kind of have that feeling as well, even if they don't piece it all together. I don't care if they ever figure out what happens in the woodmill. It doesn't matter to me. But there's a reason why that room is there with those books about hags. And there's a reason why there's runes on the walls. And then there's a reason why everyone just up and left really quickly. And there's a reason, as when they look upstairs and explore around, that there's a dead body underneath one of the beds, curled up with a holy symbol in its hands and a frozen expression of fear. And dried out and emaciated. Emaciated, not emancipated. Emaciated? Yeah, emaciated, pretty sure. I always confuse those two words. I don't confuse. I say them like flubbing, but I'm fully aware of what the definitions of those two words. But yeah, they find some spooky stuff upstairs, and there's a reason for all those things to be there. But they discern that the Haggai, if they destroy the Haggai, the hags will take like 3d10 damage and be blinded, which isn't. We found out later that being blinded actually isn't that big a deal in D&D. Disabilities go, yeah. Turns out blinded's not that big a deal. Well, my colors are freaking out tonight. It's like a vibe check. Whoa, 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 whoa. And so they kind of like discern like this is a weapon to use. Like when they're about to approach the hag's domain, they should break this eye, and it'll cause them immense pain and also a debuff essentially. And so they elect to keep it in the box for now, even though they considered just breaking it immediately. Gareth especially, Gareth being Gareth is like, if it's magic, I want to destroy it. But he's playing nice with others as the player and as a character. He's like, Gareth is outwardly vocal about what he wants to do because of his characterization, but he doesn't let that get in the way of what the party might want to do as a whole. And I really respect and appreciate that, because it lets the other players make sure that they do what their characters want to do as well. Because that's kind of the price of like he's playing an Inquisitor who's like inherently anti-magic in this anti-magic campaign, but literally the rest of the party is magic users who want to be magic users. So, everybody's allowed their own fantasy, and there'll be opportunities for everyone to explore their own. I think Gareth honestly is like excited to go and kill these hags, because it is an example of bad magic being used for bad things, and so it's kind of vindicating. It's vindicative for Gareth. But in the night, while they're long resting, and I kind of waited until it was later in the night because it took a while for this creature to get there, and I also DM revealing some of the secrets because of this whole Gareth is donning and doffing his armor and taking his armor off to sleep because he might incur exhaustion because there's a penalty one way or another. There's definitely a penalty for sleeping in his armor, but because of that he sleeps without his armor on. But I wanted him to have his armor on when a creature comes in the night as an encounter, a random encounter. Some kind of creature in the night comes strolling through. Gareth is awake. It's his turn on watch. And yeah, that was chosen on purpose. I hate to break the verisimilitude, but there's fog rolling in through the outside. It's foggy outside. There's fog rolling through underneath the door that they shut and lock that leads into this workshop room. And he hears heavy footfalls of some kind of creature walking. And he's kind of like, he's rolling. He's like, what can I roll? Like, is this normal fog? Like, what is this fog? Can I roll to see if this is supernatural or something? And I was thinking sometimes it is good to let the player roll and be like, oh, roll. And then you can straight up just tell the player kind of what you think they should know about a situation so that they can prepare. But then there's some other times where as the DM, I'm kind of just like, what do you think? Like, what do you... one of my favorite things is like when a player is like, is this guy being suspicious? Do I trust this character? And my usual response is, do you? Because if you're questioning whether or not you trust a character, then I feel like you don't trust them, and you should just let that be your interpretation of that character, and that's probably what your character is feeling as well. But yeah, when the fog is rolling in underneath the door, and like the doorknob is like being jostled and stuff like that, Gareth is like, okay, time to wake up some people. And so at this point, it's not initiative, but it is like, you have an action, a bonus action, a reaction, or a movement. What do you do with it? And so he uses his action to wake up another player, and then he goes to the door and gets ready to attack, and waits for whatever's on the other side to open up the door, and so he's going to slash it. And then that person wakes up, and they have an action, a reaction, a bonus action, and a movement, and they go and they ready an action with their crossbow. I think Valerie gets ready a crossbow shot. And I don't remember exactly. It all made sense at the time, but like eventually it comes down to like Azarine is still asleep, while the other three are still awake, just because of the way that they were readying actions and they don't have enough time to move. And mostly it was going to require them to move. Like they'd have to move over to Azarine and wake her up because they all kind of spread themselves out while they slept because, well, I mean, that makes sense actually, to be honest, like to keep yourselves kind of spread out a bit, still within touching, like, you know, screaming distance essentially, not necessarily touching distance, but like being outside of like a fireball radius is probably a smart way to sleep. So Azarine's asleep still when this thing kind of opens up the door slowly. And this is kind of when there was a little bit of fun reveal where it was like Gareth was asking like, oh, well, is it surprise? Like, can I get advantage or something on this attack as it opens the door and I slash through and stuff like that? Like, it makes sense, right? Because I'm laying an ambush. And I think I gave him some kind of bonus, or I don't know if I did or not. But it was a prodding that kind of required me to respond with, what makes you think it is surprised that you guys are in here? Which was kind of the hint that this thing is here to hunt you. It knows you're here. This isn't just a random encounter. This isn't some wild animal coming into the doors because it heard some noise. It knows you're here. No, it is not surprised. This is not a surprise round. The people who readied actions got to fire off their crossbow bolt or their spell or whatever, or, you know, they swing their sword. If anybody had readied an action, then they got to reveal it. But then no, there was no surprise action. And people were like, what do you mean? How does it know we're here? And that was kind of the trick, was like, as the DM, because this is the postmortem, I can reveal, is because of scrying earlier. This was a wight, and it was sent by the hags to go kill these adventurers. And it was fully aware of who was inside and what they were capable of. And so it's initiative, and now we have a fight with the wight. The wight opens up the door, and I let Gareth with his swing like blast the door apart essentially. And so now there's just a wight standing in the doorways. It's fighting these people, and Gareth and Valerie are firing off their spells. Eldritch Blast is going. Azarine wakes up basically within the round. I didn't really want to keep her asleep. That wasn't part of this, and it was fun. This was a full-blown wight. I played it as it was, and there was actually a few things I learned about wights halfway through, where it was like I think it was only actually one round in that I read it, and it's like, oh my god, the wight is resistant to anything that's not any damage not inflicted by silver weapons, and I didn't even know that. I only picked it because first of all, I needed some kind of undead creature because the hags are able to conjure up that sort of thing, at least in my setting, and these hags. And the second part was it needed to be something tough, and it was a CR3 wight, that's fair, is what it is. Like, the party should be able to handle that, but it was like, oh my god, like, this is on the upper end of, like, the party should be able to handle it in theory, but it was like, this is a deadly creature, is what it was. This was something that had a lot of tricks up its sleeves, and just the ability of, like, if you don't have a silver weapon, you're still hurting it, but, like, only half as much, was like, that was a game changer. I even asked the party, I was like, how cruel am I? Because I didn't keep track of the whole, it's doing full damage to you, or you're only doing half damage to it thing until now, and I didn't say what it was, but I was like, am I a cruel DM? And Gareth always, I respect Purely Salty, I really do, because he's always like, run it the way that it would be, Either that means run it by the way that it's written in the book, or run it the way that you think that creature would be in your setting. Like, make me believe it. Like, really, if that's the way that the dice were meant to roll, if that's the way this creature was meant to go, then do it. I'm ready to die. He doesn't have a death wish literally, but like he likes that feeling of overcoming real literal challenges and fighting for. And he did, yeah, he did die. No, I really respect it. When it comes to purely salty, I try to roll all the attack dice and the saving throws with roll 20, which is a little bit of a pain sometimes. I do that at detriment to myself. Hold on, I have to let the cat in. I'll be right back in literally 30 seconds. No, probably like 5 seconds. Letting the cat in. I'm still streaming. I'm not done yet, so I'm gonna keep going for another like half hour or so. Sorry. Oh, I didn't even mute it. Oh no, you heard everything.
Oh no.
But yeah, I had to let the cat in. Where'd it leave off? So Gareth is dead. Is what it comes down to. Is that this is a white, and it's a real white. I'm running it by the stats, and it's deadly. It's way more deadly than I thought. It turns out it has some horrible skills, and it takes half damage. Nobody has silvered weapons. Everyone's level 3. Could you get a silvered weapon by level 3? Probably. It costs like 100 gold to make a silvered weapon, which is it's a one-time expense. But nobody had the opportunity to do that yet. I had half a mind when I first started this campaign to say that all Inquisition weapons are silvered, but that is unreasonable. That's not that wouldn't make sense. Not even the Inquisition has that kind of money. But yeah, Gareth was like ready to go, ready to die, and I was like, okay, and he wants to be the tank character, but this is more an opportunity just because he was the nearest one. But the white uses like its life drain ability and like grabs Gareth and sucks some like life force out of him. It's an attack that if it hits and does damage, your maximum HP is lowered by that amount. And this was the second question of how cruel of a god I am, how cruel of a DM am I, because if someone is killed with that attack, they die. Like, I don't think there's any saving throws. I think if they're reduced to 0 HP, I'm pretty sure they just die. I don't think there's any saving throws. But on top of that, like, within an hour of being killed with that move, your character comes back from the grave as a thrall of the white. So that could have been horrible. That could have been a horrible encounter. But the party was smart. They went hard. They released the spells that they needed to. Valerie gets in like melee, which is Valerie's more of the ranged bard, while Azarine is the DPS bard, like melee bard, because she has like unarmored defense. And she dual wields, so her damage output is in theory on par with the greatsword. It's just that it costs her bonus action, which is that's the downside, is really. But other than that, it's like her DPS is in theory on par with Gareth for the time being, until Gareth learns extra attack, which he does pretty early, or like when he action surge. Obviously, the fighter is like the better melee DPSer, but like the bard has way more auxiliary spells and stuff like that are useful in a variety of situations. But like just comparing weapons, it's like Azarine is fully capable of doing greatsword damage on her turn. So she gets in there. Valerie casts some good buff spells, and they start like really tearing into this white basically as soon as they can. Kind of after I reveal that it's only taking half damage, and also this life drain is able to it lowers Gareth's maximum HP to like 19. And so he went from being the strongest, toughest character with the most HP to the weakest, like in like a single turn, which was tough for him. That was like stunning. That was like staggering. That was probably something that Purely Salty wasn't necessarily ready for. He likes it when I play it by the rules and go hard, but I think that was like, oh damn, I'm in a bad situation. But it's a white, and they're tough. Undead creatures in D&D, you have to punish his hubris. I have to punish his hubris. Now, I don't treat it as hubris. He has a healthy dose of adventurer's curiosity and exploration, and he just reflects it in a teasing sort of way. But I don't really think he's poking or prodding any more than I've seen many other players in my time do, which is it's fine. I just like to tease him counter wise. And there was a few situations where it was like, fortunately the white died. Like, it did eventually die, and it did not kill the entire party. But it was a little touch and go for a time there, and there was a situation, like, the white was eventually going to turn its ire on Azarine, because Azarine, like, cast something on it, and I think it was, like, I don't know if it was Hold Person, but it was some other kind of debuff spell, and the bad guys want to win, but their ability to win is tempered by what CR they are and what their intelligence are. Like, the goblins don't really have much concept of concentration or breaking it, or like spellcasters or like rolls necessarily of like, oh well, that's the tank. They just kind of attack like the nearest person. Obviously, when Bogart Redcap is around, that one is smarter, and it is like, well, that one has cast hold person on me. Go kill that one, or like stuff like that. But the white is like, that thing is smart, and it's basically a hitman. Like it was sent to go kill the party, and it knew that everyone was there. And I think I don't know, there's a second person in here already. I think hopefully it's purely salty or someone else from the party, because I can say outright, the white knew that the party was there. And it's because earlier, Brewkill failed their wisdom saving throw on scrying. Earlier, when the box was opened and the hag eye saw Brewkill, the hags went, people are coming, and cast scrying. And Brewkill rolled a wisdom saving throw and failed. And that basically meant that a security cam, a nest cam, was set up for the next 10 minutes. And the hags were able to look around the old wood mill and see all 4 adventurers and whatever conversation they were having for the next 10 minutes. I think by then the conversation about their plan to go kill the hags was pretty much over, so they didn't glean too much of that. But yeah, so like they conjured up this white and sent it to go kill him, so that when Gareth was like, shouldn't we get like advantage or something because it's a surprise round? And I was like, what makes you think that it's surprised? Because it's not. It knew everyone was in there. And so yeah, that was a tough fight, and it ended, Brewkill was like throwing fireballs and stuff. And maybe this was a cruel thing as a DM, but I don't actually think so, because it was foreshadowed. Because earlier people were talking about fire and burning down doors and burning down this, that, the other thing. And everyone kind of brought up like, no, this is an old windmill, an old wood sawmill. It would probably go up like a tinderbox. And that was a joke that happened like 2 or 3 times. And so it was foreshadowed when Brewkill used fire during this fight, and I had to roll a d20, and I maybe rolled a d20 the second time. I don't remember which, but the 2 fireball casts, basically it was like, if it's above an 11, then a fire is starting somewhere in this wood mill. And then it's going to burn for the next few rounds until it starts to spread. And so when the when the round's over, they smell smoke, and there's a fire, and they enter into the other room, and the fireball that had gone over the white's head hit the back wall, and it had ignited the wall, and it spread up to the loose tiles and hay that formed the roof, and like the whole roof was basically on fire and was burning across the top of the wood mill the entire time. And that was fun. It was urgent. Gareth runs over and is like trying to pat it down with like canvas and stuff like that, but I kind of let him know. It was like, this place is going down. It's just a question of how much are you guys getting out, and what are you bringing with you? So I had everybody roll either acrobatics or athletics. They had to leave some rations behind, which was kind of just my like, I feel like rations are the sacrificial lamb when it comes to, I want you to actually have some negative detriment for your bad rolls, but I don't really want to kill you or do HP damage or actually take away something that's special to your character. Like, I don't want to burn your favorite clothes or something, and now you feel obligated to draw your character in a different outfit or something like that. So rations and ammunition, like bows, arrows, and rations, are kind of the sacrificial lamb of supplies in this campaign. So I basically said you had some stuff cooking over the fire, and some stuff that was laid down by the bonfire. The well-contained fire that was meant to just cook some stuff and was not burning out of control. And you gotta leave that behind to pick up your tent and stuff like that. And so everybody basically skedaddles. But more importantly, no, it was fine. I liked it. Brewkill, once again, it only technically all it cost was the rations monetarily, but the bigger thing, which nobody remembered or realized until later, is that nobody finished their long rest. So people did not get back their action surge or their spells. I think, I don't know if people still like put back at some spells or something. I don't think people did though, because usually we do that at the end of the long rest. But basically, you did not get the long rest, which is fine and kind of what I expected, because this was a dungeon ultimately, and it is difficult. It is difficult to long rest in a dungeon inherently. It's possible. It's possible. If there had been different rules on the white, if there had been, if that had gone a different way, maybe if it would, I don't really know what could have happened, but I always try to make room for possibilities. But it's possible to long rest in dungeons. It's hard, especially when, I think the way that could have gone is if they had never opened the box and never deduced the hag eye. Well, first of all, they wouldn't have known that they had the hag eye, which is a boon to them, because if they break it, it's a debuff and damage to the hags. But second, the hags would never have known that they were coming, and that means that they would have had no reason to summon the white and send it to begin with. So there wouldn't really have been any danger. They would have finished the long rest. I guess that's where the butterfly effect stemmed from, was opening the box and seeing the hag eye. Here, I have to try and I force myself to look at the camera a little bit more. Hello, how are you doing? Hi. But yeah, they go on their way. They go down the trail, and this is where there's nothing really more in terms of encounters. The next thing on the docket is the boss room and the boss fight. But I want it to be a little bit interesting. So along the way, there's like creepy trees, and like the hills are rolling, and there's gnarled like cliff sides that they're going up and down, and the trail kind of like winds back and forth to like get down these hills, and the trees seem all to be dead, and they're all just like twisted. It's like being in the Mirewood. Is that what it is? No. What is it? What is it in The Hobbit? The one that's full of spiders, and the elves just live there for like no good reason. Mirkwood, I think it is. It's like Mirkwood, I think. Yeah, thank you. Mirkwood. But yeah, so they get down there, and off in the distance, they see like the dead, decaying mass of a huge tree trunk, just the bottom, just like a stump left. And I had somebody roll some history, and everyone was kind of like, at this point, like, okay, we're in fantasy land at this point, so everyone wants to roll some history, which is good. I think everybody can try at least once on a lot of rolls, unless they're like really not proficient in it, and there's no way that their character would know. But it's a story of like, these are elden trees in theory, and they're kind of like arch trees from Dark Souls, in that they're just ancient redwoods essentially that used to grow in Windthrow everywhere, but they were all mostly chopped down to create weapons. I think they were weapons and arrows and stuff like that to help destroy the wyverns, which are different from dragons in my setting. Dragons are mythical in my setting; they're not real. But wyverns they were like a wild animal, and they used to be a plague on society. But then I think the first High King is what it was. I think it was the first High King of Windthrow. Basically used all the elden wood and the elden trees to make weapons, and pretty much reduced all the wyverns to either in critically endangered or extinct status. And this is just one leftover tree that the hags seem to have moved into. And I know that that's what's up ahead. I think the only other issue is that they have that there's like a ball that kind of goes around, and it really all that it was like a spotlight, and if it had been seen, it was like a familiar for the hags, and they could cast stuff through it, so it would have like shot down lightning bolt and stuff like that. And I have them like roll stealth, and they collectively as a total they roll well enough to avoid it for the most part. I think that they would have been seen if it weren't for the fact that they take out the hag eye finally, and like, well, we're close, now's the time to do it. So they take the box, they put it on the ground, and they cover it with a sheet so the hag eye can't see them, and Gareth takes his sword and plunges it down. And when they shatter the hag eye, they hear some kind of horrible screams off in the distance, and that's the sound of the hags taking 3d10 psychic damage and becoming blinded. And I think the spotlight goes out, and if it didn't, it just went on its journey because it was no longer being piloted by the hags. And that's when they rush in. I have them roll acrobatics and athletics to kind of see how fast they bust in there. And really all that it controlled was where they started in the area. If they all like rolled natural 20s, I would have been like, just pick anywhere you want to be on this battle mat, essentially. But the way they rolled, I let Azarine kind of like get up on top. I don't know what she really would have done there. Yeah, she ninja'd up apparently. She just jumped up like some of the branches and some of the old gnarled, twisted roots to get to the top of the lip of the oak tree, not the oak tree, the elden tree. But I don't know what she really could have done there. From there, she's not like a sniper or anything like that. But she elected to jump down eventually anyway. But it was just an opportunity. But yeah, the party jumps in and they see the hags kind of conducting some kind of like ritual. There's a huge cauldron. It's like 15 feet wide. It probably weighs like tons. If not like, at least 1,000 pounds with the fluid inside as well. It's some kind of bubbling cauldron. And this is kind of my fun creating like witches, right? Like the classic witches coven. They're doing some kind of devil ritual. There's like dead bodies and sacrificed animals and all kinds of creepy things. And above them, it looks like they're standing underneath like a bonfire. Like there's green fire all up above, but it's not burning them or anything like that. It's like standing underneath some kind of horrifying aurora borealis. And then the fight starts. And it was tough. It was pretty tough indeed. A hag coven, a hag by itself is a worthwhile creature for a third level four-man party. Three of them is actually pretty tough because then they get an expanded spell list. Because normally a hag only knows like 2 or 3 spells, and then it just has like its claw attacks. Most of the hags really, their usual MO is like lies and deception. And then when they're in a coven, they become like a legitimate battle force. So they start casting spells and stuff like that, and they bust out like their high-level lightning bolts like immediately. And I think this fight in general made the party really, really scared because a lot of people went down or almost went down, and a lot of the party afterwards is like, oh, well, let me think about maybe a backup character. If my character, I don't know if it was, I don't know if that's connected. But a lot of I think the party got pretty spooked. I was at like 5 HP the whole time. Yeah, like Brookehild got hit with a lightning bolt immediately and failed her save, so she took like full damage. And it was like 20-something damage, and Brookehild only has like 20-something health. But she stays upright, and it went. I know this is a bold statement to make as the DM, but it actually went pretty hard in the player's favor. Ironically, I know it was pretty scary because people almost went down or did go down, and there was a few other situations that were more fun and funny in there, and the party was like for the most part pretty scared. But it was pretty favor of you have finesse on killing yourself. Yeah, we'll get to that. But it was pretty much the whole time. It was pretty much in the player's favor, especially since even there was some. Not all Monster Manual monsters are created equal. Like the HP that they give you is an average of a range. So not every Displacer Beast needs to have 85 HP. Some Displacer Beasts have less Constitution or more Constitution, and they'll have higher or lower HP because of that. These hags didn't necessarily have the same HP as each other. I made a joke in the thing because Gareth like makes an attack and he rolls like just above a certain number and he's like, oh well, he has like sweeping attacks, so we can attack 2 at the same time. So it's like, okay, well I'll attack the next one. And I'm like, oh, bold of you to assume that they have the same AC. And he was like, fuck you. And at the time it was like, yeah, that was just me kind of joking. Yeah, they all basically had the same AC, but like. I'm not obligated to have these creatures have the same AC. One of the hags might have seriously had 18 AC while the other 2 had 15 and 16 or whatever. That can totally happen. Next level up, I think I'm going to invest in an attack spell or healing spell. Yeah, you got healing word right now, but I truly, ironically, is that usually your bonus action's tied up with using your chakrams anyway. I want Lightning Bolt. Yeah, Lightning Bolt's a great spell, but you got to be like level like 8 or something to learn it. It's really high level. Lightning Bolt's a pretty great spell. Yeah, finesse on killing yourself. Yeah, at one point we learned a lot about spells, and I went in with an open mind. I was kind of aware, like, I don't know how all these spells work, but we'll all work them out together, and we'll do it all in a fair and reasonable way. I wasn't really too worried about it. There was one, I tried to cast one, and it seemed reasonable and powerful, and I was like, yeah, this is good, and they're like, oh, well, it's touch. And I was like, oh, all right, well, then the hag does something else. Because the hag would know that spell is with touch. But, stuff like that was that was fun. So I just used a different spell. There's a few instances where it was fun where the party was like, oh, well, thank God the hag didn't do this. And I was like, oh, does the hag not do this? And they're like, no, you already said the hag does this other thing. And I was like, yeah, you're right. But it's I want to play it fair. I want the players to be able to say like, oh, well, good thing the hag didn't do this without feeling like they're giving the DM ideas to do next time, because I want them to kind of be able to have a commentary without feeling like they have to hush themselves for fear it'll make something harder than it is already. But yeah, one of the hags looks at Valerie, and they're kind of having this back and forth rivalry because Valerie's like casting vicious mockery on the hag, and the hag is like recovering and like trying to attack Valerie. And eventually the hag casts polymorph on Valerie, and Valerie fails her wisdom saving throw, and so is turned into a toad. However, after that, I don't really know what happens with I don't have a lot of experience with polymorph being used as an aggressive spell. I have experience of it being used as a buff, like I turn myself into a dinosaur or a dragon to gain the strong attacks thereof, but I don't have a lot of experience it being used as a debuff. So me and Purely Salty basically are reading it, trying to be like, what happens? And Purely Salty's like, well, if the creature gets reduced to HP, like to 0, then it turns back to normal. And my question was like, well, is it unconscious then? And then he's like, no, it just becomes, if there's any overspillage. So if you, like the frog, we found out that the frog has like 10 HP or 1 HP or like I think it only had like 2 HP, like I think it really was like 1 HP. And so if the frog took 5 HP, then it would die, and then Valerie would take the remaining 4 HP to her maximum HP, or whatever HP she was at before she transformed. And I was like, that's really cool, and that's really interesting. We learned a lot about polymorph, and it was a really cool and fun spell. It did not feel overpowered. It felt just like the level of power it should be for it's like a level 2 spell. Like, it's not really powerful, to be honest with you. And it kind of was. I was eager to see the way that it was supposed to be ruled via the rules, because I've noticed that actually the DMs are scared of certain spells that they don't need to be scared of, because it turns out if you read carefully and follow the tag-based system that's in D&D player handbook and DM's handbook inherently, everything's pretty well balanced. And I had faith that polymorph wasn't going to be a team kill spell. And it turned out not to be. It turned out to be really fun, of just like how the frog now is like, I have to kill myself. I have to find a way to die. And so, because apparently, if you kill the polymorphed creature, the original creature will come back. And so basically it comes down to the party trying to figure out the most efficient way to kill this frog wearing Valerie's hat. And so Brookhild's like, Gareth is like, if you throw the frog, you'll take fall damage, but you have to throw it like 20 feet up in the air. And that way you don't have to waste a spell slot or try to hit it with a fucking Eldritch Blast or something, which might do a lot of damage. And so Brookhild like comes over and I'm like, okay, throw the frog. And like, this is where the rules and like the narrative start to conflict, though looking back it turns out at the time it was like, in theory it was like, do the rules state that Brookheld has to roll a grapple check to pick up the frog and then she has to wait until next turn in order to throw the frog? Because that seems ridiculous. And everyone was like, yeah, that does seem ridiculous. And I'm like, I agree, which is why we're not going to do that. You pick up the frog and throw it, but I'm going to make you roll athletics or dexterity, whatever it is to throw a frog, whatever you think that might be. But now that I look back on it, I think that the rules kind of take care of that as simply you're interacting with an object, and you're able to do that for free on your turn. Like, you can press a button or pull a lever on your turn without that being your action or bonus action or movement. And I don't feel like picking up frog is any more extravagant than pulling a lever. So, like, ultimately it comes down to, like, it worked out the way that it should have worked out. However, Brookhild rolls really bad to throw the frog, so it limply falls out of her hand like a softball throw, like that has gone wide, and just like rolls across the floor and takes no damage. And then Azarine has to take her action to throw a chakram at the frog, but she misses, and because the frog still has AC. Yeah, frogs were made to jump and flop around. No, because there was a lot of, and I feel like the party was pretty much on my side during this, because I don't think that, at no point was it me trying to bullshit anybody. It was just me trying to play it by the rules, and everyone kind of understood that. But it was like, the frog still has AC, and even if you might want to attack it, maybe I would give you advantage, but it's like, it's the reason it's hard to hit is because it's so small. Like, it has nothing to do with, like, it's moving around or it has armor or anything like that. Like, it's just hard to hit. It's just it's a tiny little frog, and like Azarine's like 30 feet away trying to throw a chakram at it. So it's like, you still have to hit its AC. Even if Gareth ran over and just like slammed his sword down on it, it's like you still have to like fucking hit the frog. But even then it was like it was a lot of fun that like the chakram like falls like shy. But now it's the frog's turn, and the frog looks down at the chakram and goes, I have to die. And I don't know what level of self-preservation instinct Valerie the frog had to overcome in that moment to take the frog-like neck and throw it down on the edge of the chakram and decapitate itself. That is a fucked up thing to do. I almost feel like you should have disadvantage to try to attack yourself, to be honest. Or at the very least, you should have to roll to hit your own AC. But I don't think there are any rules for attacking yourself as far as I'm aware, so I just say, like, roll damage. I don't think you need to roll AC, but we'll see if well, maybe I did have him roll. I think I did have the frog roll, because it was like you have to overcome your own self-preservation instinct. And you don't have thumbs, and you're like half an ounce. Like, you have to like throw your body at this chakram edge to try and to kill yourself. But the frog succeeds in suicide, and so I described the frog decapitating itself, and then nothing happens for like a good like 3 seconds, and everyone's like, and then I describe, okay, yeah, then there's a puff of smoke, and Valerie the Bard now comes back to us. Except she's taken an extra few hit points of damage, because the chakram does more damage than just 1 HP, so she takes like an extra 5 or something. But she's back in the fight. And at this point, there's been like lightning bolts and stuff like that. And once again, I feel like the party was really scared, but I don't think they really needed to be, because like if anybody went down, then that was just, healing word and potions could have taken care of that. And also the hags only have so many spell slots, and by the end of that fight, they were out. Like, by the end of that fight, they'd used every lightning bolt that they could. So like there wasn't gonna be, it wasn't just gonna be lightning bolt until the end of the fight. It was like they only had like 3, and then they were done. And that wasn't enough. Basically, it was like, unless they could have just outright killed a player with those 3 spells, like those 3 lightning bolts, they were gonna lose. Like, if they and they knew that. It was like we used our 5th level, 6th level, and 3rd level and 4th level spells, all like, and we have not killed these adventurers. We're going to lose, because that's the game. That's how it works. That's the balance. Like if you didn't kill those players with your highest level spells, you're not going to, because now the hags only have levels 1, 2 left. Level 1, maybe some 3 level stuff, 3rd level spells, and some cantrips and claw attacks. And they Gareth in theory goes down. He did a good job of tricking everybody. I thought he did go down, and he was asking like, "Oh, is the hag gonna try and attack me now that I'm on the ground and like force my death saving throws?" And I thought about it, but I was like, "Nah, the hags wouldn't do that." The hag is going to move on to Azarine. So I described like the hag like walks away from Azarine, and I did this without knowing anything. This was all just like natural. So the hag steps away to line up a shot on Azarine, who is like the second highest, if not first highest DPS output person on the party, unless Gareth has Action Surge, which he doesn't, because they didn't finish his long rest. He tried to use Action Surge, and I'm like, you didn't finish the long rest? And he went, fuck. Whoopsies. But Azarine becomes the second biggest threat, essentially. And so the hag is like lining up the shot, and when he steps away, Gareth goes, I roll an attack of opportunity. And I'm like, what? You're unconscious. Like, I'm not going to let you roll. And he pastes into the chat, like, his like survivor skill as a half-orc. If he takes a hit that would reduce him below 0 HP, instead he is set to 1 HP for once per day. So he basically has like this survival thing where it's like if he's reduced, he has a tank buster ability where it's like if I take a shit ton of damage and I'm supposed to go down, instead I have one last chance. I'm put at 1 HP instead. And I was like stunned. Everyone was stunned. I was surprised. The hag was surprised. And he rolls his attack of opportunity, and I'm like, take advantage. Take advantage. You've done so good. You RP'd it. And that was one of those instances where we broke the rules in favor of the party, because it was like he shouldn't technically have advantage, but it was so cool. It was so bra moment. But yeah, so he's surprised, like he rises up off the ground with this fucking rising greatsword and slashes across the hag and does like another like 12 points of damage, and the hag is like, whoa, stunned as she falls over. She wasn't killed, but it was like this big moment of like, oh shit. And then I think he second wins or something like that. I think someone heals him, but he gets back up really quickly. I think Azarine and Valor, I think he quaffs a potion on his turn and second wins, and then I think Valerie does healing word on him. He's like back up to full HP, which is only 19 because he still has that debuff from the white, but he's back up like instantly, essentially. And that's why I was like, these hags seem scary, but like in one single turn, Gareth faked his death and then came immediately back to max HP, and everyone's up, and hags have no more high level spell slots. The fight's over. And that's when one of the hags begins to continue the ritual. She raises her hands and goes over, and they all assume some kind of position where they're now like doing some kind of summoning, some kind of thing, though. The cauldron's bubbling, and essence of aether is coming from the bodies that they've sacrificed. And one apparently was still alive, some flayed human who expires next to Azarine as their essence is drawn from their body into the cauldron as this ritual is continued. And some more turns, some fights, some swings happen back and forth. But what is going to happen is the hags are going to lose, and the hags know this. And so the one hag, the leader hag, turns to the other hag and says, "We need more ether," and reaches out her finger and kills the other hag, which was very dramatic. And it was very fun. It was cool. The one hag is killed by the other hag, and the ethereal, the mana, the ethereal essence, the spiritual energy leaves that third hag and enters into the cauldron. And seemingly that's enough to finish off the mana, though, that is needed for this ritual. But like one of the party members, one of the party is like, what? How do they do that? Like, how are they able to do that much damage in one turn? And there's multiple responses to that. Like, why if the hag was able to do enough damage to one shot the other hag, why didn't she do that on Brughild or Gareth and kill one of them outright instead? And there's multiple answers to that question. The first of all is that hag was pretty damaged already, and it was like the hag is like burning one of their final high remaining slot to basically cast Thunderbolt. I didn't describe it as Thunderbolt because, to be honest, at the time it didn't matter. All that mattered was the hag is using the chief hag, the hag mistress, is using all of her remaining power to kill the other hag, and so she's blowing the remainder of her energy to do this. The second of all is the third hag. That was the weakest hag. Like, stat wise, maybe like, yeah, it had the same AC and stuff like that, but that was the youngest child, right? That was the weak one. That was the one that was frail. That was the one that wasn't ready. That was the one that wasn't able to fight back from the third chief hag when they turn on each other. That one wasn't ready for it. The second response is what that hag wanted. What the chief hag wanted was aether, was mana, was spiritual energy, and she assumed, and I think rightly assumed, that it was her fellow hags that had more of that than any of the party players. Gareth isn't even a magic user. What would killing that one, like, if you want more mana, killing that hag is how she assumed was she was going to get the most out of it. Obviously, that probably turns out not to be true, actually, especially since these players are branded with some kind of magical brand that actually does connect them to the Aether in a strong way. But she didn't know that. So what she wanted was Aether. And she was using the last of her energy to kill her fellow hag, who, in response, was the weakest hag, and also was not mentally prepared to fight back. She was not ready for her ally to turn on her. But third of all, it was fucking cool and dramatic, and I can do what I want because I'm the DM. I mean, you know, cutscenes happen like that all the time. There's all kinds of video game descriptions that I can come up where, in theory, like an enemy that was incredibly difficult to kill, like in gameplay purposes, is just like ripped in half. Like Megatron picks up Jazz at the end of Transformers and just rips Jazz in half and throws him aside. And it's like, well, why doesn't Megatron do that to any of the other Autobots? And it's like, because it's not dramatic. Because I'm the DM and I can do what I want. That hag could have had no spell slots left and still would have been able to do that. That was a cutscene thing where it was like, if the hags are still alive by this point in the fight, they're going to try and complete this ritual, even if it means killing one of their fellow hags by whatever means possible. That hag would have used her fucking claws and ripped her face off if she had to. It didn't really matter, because the fight was already lost by the hags anyway. They didn't, and also from the standpoint of forgetting numbers for a second, the hags kind of realized, and maybe the numbers even reinforce this, the party was stronger than the hags. Maybe Gareth doesn't have more HP than a single hag. Maybe Gareth doesn't have higher. Maybe Azarine doesn't have higher AC. Well, actually, Azarine has pretty high AC with an unarmed attempt. Maybe Brookehill doesn't have as much AC as the hags. Maybe the hags have more spell slots than Brookehill and Azarine combined. But looking at the whole, that hag was weaker than the party. So in terms of like weighing the scale of what is the potential of your life, what is the potential of your life force, that hag way easier to kill than party in theory. Even also double in theory. Even if the hag did have some kind of one-shot ability that like she had just been saving, that had a mechanical ability, that she could just snap her fingers and power word kill somebody, and that was like that's not what happened. Obviously, it was just a case of it was a story narrative thing, and you know I'm the DM and I can do what I want to make a narratively satisfying story. But it was like, sure, kill one of the party members. They're just going to use healing word or a healing potion to get that fucker back up literally next round. So it was like even if the hag did want to do that and had the ability to do it, which they didn't. I will just admit that it's like the hag was, you know, that was a story thing. And there's in-story justification for it, but ultimately the ultimate justification I have is that was cool and dramatic, and it was awesome, and I loved it, and the party did too. But yeah, that was that you know, life force measuring. It's like they would have just upped that person anyway. They would have gone back up next round. But now the summoning ritual is complete, and it's just Gareth like chopping down, and the rest of the party chopping down the hags as fast as they can because they'll think they'll stop it, but it's too late. It's too late. They kill the other hag, and the essence just goes into the ritual anyway, further expediting the process. They're trying to summon. They're chanting, "The Morrigan, the goddess of karma herself." This ancient, but not like this ancient goddess of chaos and karma. That's their patron deity that they're trying to summon, the crow goddess herself. And there's been hints to this the entire time, but this is like now, oh my god, they're actually trying to do this. And so they try to cut down the rest of the hags, and now there's just the third hag left. And at this point, I describe kind of like their brands starting to glow, especially after they'd taken a huge amount of damage and stuff like that. I wanted to have this dramatic, like your brands begin to glow, your tattoos begin to glow, and up in the sky, they see like some kind of black feathered creature descending from the clouds. But the third hag like essentially gives up. Like the third hag like stops attacking and stuff like that, and kind of like takes the party out of it. And it's weird because it's like as soon as that one stops trying to attack, the party doesn't want to attack either. Ironically, they stop. They just kind of like run over to it and they surround her. But we're not out of it. We're not out of initiative. And that hag does not suddenly have less AC or less HP or less spell slots, which is something for us to notice anyway. I'm here just in time. You're here so fucking late, dude. Also, it only says I have 2 viewers, but there's Coconut, Punk Chops, and Purely Salty. But yeah, it's just this third hag, essentially. That's the only one that's left. And she kind of sort of gives up. Also, yeah, Gareth works under arrest if possible. Yeah, I get it. Inquisition, yeah. So it's like when the third one stops attacking. I mean, the drama of the fight was when that third hag turned to the second and killed them instantly, which was obviously just like there's in-story justification for it. That was the weakest hag. The chief hag, the mistress hag, was using all of her energy remaining to kill this other hag, and killing one of the players wouldn't have helped anyway because they would have just gotten that person up next turn anyway. And the hag wanted mana. And that third hag had more mana than Valerie did, or Gareth did, to complete the ritual. But also, it was just, I'm the DM, and some cool story stuff can fucking happen if I want to. And that's the main reason as to how that hag was able to kill that other hag. But now there's just the third one, and the ritual is seemingly complete, and now this giant feathery beast is coming down, and they're trying to figure out what to do with this hag, and the hag is like rambling. But she sees the brands on some of the players, and she says, "The king's sigils," and starts kind of going crazy, like, "Oh, you will save us! It is time, the change is upon us!" And she starts ranting and raving about like New World and how the barriers are coming down and how Aether will rule and the people that wronged them will be destroyed. And she's excited that the Morrigan is here, descending from the skies to now help right the wrongs that have been levied against the hags, and how a new age of chaos is about to reign. But the fight's not over, and that hag still has the same AC that she did have, and still has the same HP that she did have. And so she like takes out her tarot cards, and she's like revealing some kind of horrible future. She like plays all the worst cards essentially, but she like she casts Hold Person on Azarine and stands up, and she's like, "I will take your brands for myself," and she goes to like make claw attacks. Like, the fight's not over. I think I do let everyone get like, I think everyone had kind of like held in action, quote unquote, but it wasn't like, no, you're not going to be able to just like slit this hag's throat just because you guys got up on her business, because she still has the same AC and it's natural armor. It's not just like her skin is just inherently that tough, so it's not even like having a blade to her throat is like really all that much of an advantage. But the fight continues essentially for like another few rounds. Not another few rounds. It's really just a few more turns. But Azarine gets held for a second, and she goes to make the claw attack, and I think Gareth just like blasts into her with his sword, and everyone just like obliterates this hag like as soon as possible. And she has like maybe 10 HP left by the time I'm done. She was the least hurt one. And she was very tough, and I describe how she has like fire over her body as she's like assuming the power of the Aether around her. And really that was just my description to kind of let the players know like the fight's not over yet, and this hag looks like it still has power left to kill you guys with. I didn't give it any more power. I didn't give it any more spell slots. I didn't give it any more HP than it already had. That was just a visual cue of like, the fight's not over, don't put your guard down. It have being wreathed in ethereal energies. But it's the third and final hag of this coven. But they basically have already won. Like I said, they won. The party won when the hag coven ran out of spell slots. They ran out of high level spell slots after their third like lightning bolt. And now the fight was over after that point, and the hags knew that, and they just went over and finished their ritual. And the crow goddess descends down above, and the party's getting ready for this extra fight, this horrible creature, just like how last time a dragon got summoned, everything got obliterated. Good day, Tyler Packish. We're doing our postmortem of the last session. I'm afraid I can't go back and relay everything, but you're here for the best part. But the crow goddess that the hags had summoned in this previous ritual comes down from the heavens, and the party, having defeated the hags, basically is getting ready to kill the third and final hag, and the party's ready to defend themselves against this crow monstrosity coming down from the summoning ritual. And that crow monstrosity comes down and smashes the hag into the ground, killing it instantly. And the party went, oh ho 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 ho. And the crow turns its face around and kind of reveals that it's some kind of otherworldly entity, most certainly. Deity? God? Maybe. But it hurts to look at. Like, when people look at it, I literally have them roll wisdom saving throws. Otherwise, they become like paralyzed for a second. But it kills the third hag. Like that crow goddess that the hags tried to summon. Their very own summoned creation comes down and just smashes the hag into the ground, kills it with its talons. And then it goes around the outside of the area and asks, like, who summoned me? And some such things. And I do it in a spooky voice. I have my voice modulator that I use sometimes for otherworldly entities. I don't know if it's working right now, but it speaks in an otherworldly tone. but it starts to just kind of walk around and look at all the defilement, and I describe how it seems disgusted by the bodies and what the hags have done, and it defiles the corpses of the hags. It kind of like picks them up and examines them in its claw-like talons and throws the body like out of the tree trunk that is this lair for the hags. And the party's like, what do we do? What is this? And I think Gareth kind of like just purely subtly, I don't think knew what to do, but he was like, well, I think I know what Gareth would do. And Gareth would be like, what are you and what are you doing here, and can you tell us anything about our sigils? And I have him roll a wisdom saving throw, both because he's being a little bit defiant towards this god, but second of all, just looking at this thing is hard on your brain. And he fails, and so Gareth is just like frozen in place with his finger up, just kind of like stuck there, and everyone sort of notices like, oh, well, maybe we should avoid gazing. And Brookegild immediately is like trying to treat it with reverence, and kind of like, Brookegild is self-preserving, not necessarily pious, rather, but self-preserving. And so it's like, oh, great Morrigan, please, can you help us with our, and kind of initiates this dialogue, and there's this back and forth of describing like, the Morrigan, as it describes itself, kind of like says, I am the goddess of karma, but I'm not the goddess of chaos. I'm the goddess of karma and justice. I'm not the goddess of karma and chaos. And I don't know why these creatures summon me. I don't know how many millennia have passed, essentially, for my image, for my teachings to be warped and perverted, until only these hag-like creatures, these monsters that kidnap children and kidnap sacrifices, are my assistance is required. Oh, please don't fall over. Good. Yeah, she just said, well, I just woke up, where the hell am I? So the Morrigan starts to walk around and starts to question the party members and starts to ask questions in return of the Morrigan. And there's this dialogue that's opening up as the Morrigan kind of tries to figure out, like, how long have I been gone? Who are you people? They try to ask it what it wants. And I think Gareth is a little smitten because he's like, the goddess of justice? I serve justice. I like just things. And Valerie is like, Valerie's curious. Valerie embodies that 5th edition classic D&D player, classic D&D adventurer who wants to explore, and wants to see the world. And so Valerie's like, I have to look. And so she looks, and I have her roll wisdom saving throw, and she succeeds. And I was like, I described this face, this owl-like face, but there's like shifting features on it, and you sometimes see like a woman's face. But as you look deeper and closer, and you beat the wisdom saving throw, there's a second save after it. I wouldn't say smitten. All right, fine, not smitten, but surprised. Beguiled. But yeah, Valerie looks into the face of this goddess and kind of sees like warping features, and the goddess kind of like acknowledges that like, oh, you've passed the wisdom saving throw, and kind of looks down and says, look into my eyes. And Valerie looks in, and I think at this point it's a charisma saving throw at this point. And she's like, she sees like other worlds and other realms and like astral planes and like places well beyond the normal realm, and all kinds of strange stuff like that. But yeah, and she saves the second time, and at this point she can now see the Morrigan proper, which is like, has like feminine features, like a female's face. Is it more of a Ave Maria moment, or more of a RLP and Tear sort of? Well, I'll let them decide. This is a low magic-y thing. Also, does this? Yeah, well, I only meant that in the case of the humans and your players. I described the world that your characters would experience, not necessarily the world as it is. When I said this is a low magic setting, that was just the characters' experiences. That was not indicative of the laws of the land. But yeah, they have this experience with this otherworldly thing. I don't know. I don't even want to say it's a deity necessarily, because in theory, a deity is not physical, and this thing is physical. Fast forward to 1980s Germany. Why? I don't know if I understand that reference. But yeah, it's an otherworldly kind of experience that they're having. But they go back and forth. They ask it about the brands, and the owl goddess kind of describes like the brands are just something that seems, I've seen them time and time again. We found them, like we as deities, as we describe ourselves, I guess our pantheon, found those runes etched across like landscapes, and we just took them into our alphabet and we turned them into words for ourselves, and they mean something, but I don't know if they'll mean something in your tongue, and I don't know if those symbols were ever meant to be these words that we have prescribed to them. I'm just saying, she sees the 1980s German city in the eyes, picturing how vexing it would be. Oh, just like sees like crazy shit, yeah. But yeah, so like the Morrigan kind of goes around and says like that sigil in my tongue means this, but I don't know if that has any bearing on what that means. All I know is that these sigils show up time and time again. There's been adventurers before you that have had these sigils on you, and it's marked them for greatness. And she kind of describes it in a way that it's not like prophecy necessarily. It's not like, oh, you're now destined. It's just a pattern. It's just a reoccurring pattern. Mortals before have had these sigils on them, and they've always done great things. They've become not gods, sorry. They've become like demigods, I guess, like people that we would call in real life demigods, like Hercules and Achilles, or like I forgot the name of the actual Monkey King, but like the Monkey King from Journey to the West, like those kind of figures in history have always had these like sigils, either branded on them or associated with them, and that's all the Morrigan says. Isn't his name the Monkey King? No, he has a name. It's like Son Wukong, I think is his name. But like I wanted to have more examples of demigod like people that weren't just from white popular culture. I wanted to try and get a little bit more variety, so I wanted to pull the Monkey King in. Not that that's much better, but yeah, I wanted to have more examples. Gilgamesh, that's a good one. That's a good one because he's a king too, and the implication is that these sigils mark people destined for like leadership as well. And she just says like, there's no prophecy at work. You're not destined to do things. This is just a recurring pattern, some kind of cycle that I've seen before. But she doesn't seem to remember a lot, and she seems to be dazed, and she says a line that it was very important, and I hope the players picked up on it, where she says, I have been forgotten, and so I have forgotten. And the implications therein saying that, like, because people have forgotten me, and I've been gone from the world for so long that I myself don't remember a lot of things that maybe I should. And they ask a few other quick questions about, like, oh, do you know who St. Joan is? Because at this point, St. Joan really hasn't had that big of an impact on the game. It's just a name. It's just a title. But it's been a reoccurring thing because everywhere they go, they seem to find a tombstone or a shrine to St. Joan and a different description of how she died or where she died. And at this point, the players have now no less than 3 different places that St. Joan has supposedly died. That's why I think that this game is called The Many Lives and Deaths of St. Joan. I don't know if it should be called The Many Stories and Deaths of St. Joan. It doesn't really matter. Story is the same as a life. It's a synonym to me. Just a result of translation, really. Oh no, foreshadowing. Oh, foreshadowing in my Postmortem game? What? It's more likely than you think. But yeah, the Morrigan is just this experience of the party with thought that there were. The Morrigan is the reward at the end of the dungeon. At the end of the dungeon, there's more than just treasure. It's also like RP treasure, and that's what a good dungeon should be in Dungeons and Dragons. So this is the end of the dungeon. They beat the boss. They get the reward, both in terms of money. They're going to get 1,000 gold pieces and then some, maybe even. I mean, they found treasure along the way, but they also have kind of figured out a little bit more information about what happened at Fogwood Mills. So maybe Brewkill will follow up on that. But yeah, the Morrigan is kind of like their RP reward. And she has a lot of fun talking with them, and she kind of promises that she'll help them the best that she can, but she's kind of a new person in this world as well. She's just like, I've just been meant, I was not meant to come back, is kind of what she's implying. She's like, if I'm back, then something has gone horribly wrong. And they ask her about the dragon that was at the summoning ritual that branded them and destroyed the starting town. And she says, I know what you're talking about. That dragon is Diathustra Diamundra, the Twin Tails, and it's the father of all fiends. But he is older than me, is what she says. He was a myth when I was a god, like, is what she's saying. So they get a little bit more story related stuff, and basically she promises, like, I will help you, and I will just let you know ahead of time you will need allies, a whole deck full. And she takes up the tarot cards that the hag dropped, and she kind of like does something with them, and they become pristine and clean again. And she hands off the 22 Major Arcana tarot cards to Azarine, who's just like the nearest person, essentially. And she says, you're going to need allies, a whole deck full, implying that the faced cards of the tarot cards, she says, like, every king's sigil marked person in history has always had a retinue, has always had like NPC helpers, has always had like their own team, essentially. They're people that they've attracted. She said that they've always been destined to be leaders of some kind, and they've always had around 22, is what she's implying. She didn't say it outright, but she's kind of implying that it's like They've always had around 22 helpers, or there's at least 22 NPCs involved in their life. And so that's what she means by a whole deck full. And so she hands these now very nice, very unique cards she hands off to Azarine as kind of like a way to be like, here you go. Here, have a gift to prove that this actually happened. As well as maybe a record, I suppose. But I don't know what else they said. It was just a back and forth of like just getting as much information as they can out of the Morrigan, and the Morrigan responding as best as it can. It seemed like it was a very helpful NPC for the most part, and it did not like the hags. It did not like the hags at all. It was referring to them as like vile creatures. And this is the goddess of justice, essentially, is what she says. She's like, I don't know how I've been warped over time, but I was the goddess of justice, not the goddess of chaos. I like her. Ooh, yeah, I wanted everyone to like her. She was supposed to be scary, and she was supposed to be overbearing, and that's like, even looking at her caused like paralysis if you weren't careful. That was also kind of like a backup feature, basically, of like being in her presence can force. She has the right of way when it comes to conversation, if that makes any sense. Because like if she like looking at her ends up being like causing possible paralysis or stunning, and so it's like she basically can always have whatever the first and last word if she wants. Not that she wants to. She's very soft spoken and did not speak much, actually. She only kind of spoke she tried to speak very plainly for the most part, and clearly, but she did have a weird way of conveying her ideas. But by the end of it, everyone was kind of like, we're on board with the Morrigan, and even Gareth was like having trouble. I don't know if it was purely salty, like the player having trouble kind of assembling what they wanted Gareth to say, or if it was in character Gareth not quite sure what to say to the goddess of justice. But essentially it came down to like, if you're really the goddess of justice and we're on the same side, and I want to help you, help me, help you. The goddess was kind of like, it wasn't really about servitude. It wasn't about ordering around. It wasn't about humiliating or anything. Well, I guess it was a little bit, but it was this idea of like, the Morrigan says like, would you kneel? And it was like, it wasn't like I'm looking for a follower, but it was sort of like, it was a test is what it was. It was a test against Gareth, and I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I think the characters might be able to piece it two and two together. And this is Postmortem, and this is what you guys come for and what I do this for anyway, and it's fun. But it was a test of Gareth's character. Gareth is a paladin now if he wants to be, which I don't really mind saying. Like if Gareth is like, I in theory wouldn't mind possibly being a paladin of the goddess of justice, then it's like, well, then you are. I mean, that would be really cool. There would be more encounters with the Morrigan, and maybe even like conveying to Gareth like in his sleep through dreams and stuff like that. And he would be, yeah, if he wanted to be a paladin, if any of the party wanted to become a paladin for the Morrigan, the Morrigan has that power to bestow. Ironically, it would be tempered because it'd be like, well, I can only make you a level 3 paladin. I don't have enough power to make you any stronger than that. But yeah, she would do that. She can do that. But it was a test against Gareth when she said, would you kneel? Because it was a test to see, is Gareth the kind of person who is willing to put his pride on the back burner? Like, I know who Gareth is, but the Morrigan doesn't. So the Morrigan wanted to check, like, are you just a prideful person who thinks that they fight for justice because it makes them look good, or do you actually do it? So she's like, would you kneel? And so it was like, would Gareth be willing to like get on his knees and actually kind of like, not necessarily grovel, but it was a test of humility is what it was. It was a test of pride. It was a test of humility. It was a test of character for the Morrigan to kind of like see, like, do you really care enough to look a bit foolish for a second, to look like you're in servitude to Gareth, even though I see that you. He asked like, oh, do you know the Inquisition? She's like, no, I have no idea what the Inquisition is. I've been gone for 1,000 years, maybe more. The Inquisition is like maybe 20 years old, in theory. I think it's even younger than that. But it's like, no, the Morrigan has no idea what the Inquisition is. But yeah, but Gareth does, and so the Morrigan comes over and takes up Gareth's sword, and this is test number 2 of like, will you give away your ability to defend do you trust me enough to lend me your weapon and you be weaponless for a moment in front of me? And that was test number 2, is like, do you really believe in justice? Will you put your pride on the back burner to convey it? And then 2, do you trust in justice enough to not betray you? And that was, 2. It didn't. There was no fail condition besides like the Morrigan kind of shrugs and goes on with his day. It wasn't going to hold it against Gareth. But yeah, he does, and so the Morrigan picks up Gareth's sword and puts it over his shoulder on the left and on the right, and knights Gareth in theory, and right then and there, that is first of all, at the very least, it's an allyship with the Morrigan. The Morrigan's like, all right, well, I guess I can trust you guys because you wanted to kill these hags, and you seem to trust me. You guys seem to be all right, and you are marked with the king's sigils. And even though it doesn't necessarily, it makes you great, it doesn't necessarily make you good. She never said good. She only said great. But then on top of that is, well, you guys seem to be okay for the most part, and she doesn't know what's going on. But she knights Gareth, and if Gareth wanted to, yeah, he could be a paladin. I would just straight up let him shift his 3 levels in fighter over to 3 levels in paladin, and he would just be a paladin now. I wouldn't make him multi-class if he wanted to. Oh, I don't mean like mechanically. I do. I know what you meant, but I wanted to take it as an opportunity to talk about the mechanical benefit as well. Of it's a story-related opportunity to shift classes essentially, with possible homebrew systems therein. I mean, obviously, becoming allies with a Morrigan is already going to have its own boons in one way or another. But the Morrigan doesn't have a lot to give right now. But if it does have anything to give, it's the power to make a pact, either a Warlock pact or a Paladin pact or a Cleric pact. Like, it could totally do that. And I like talking about that, and I like mentioning it because I think that's really cool. It's like the party meeting a character that's like actually able to hand off that's some kind of thing. Hand off that's some kind of power. If it's a god or not. Obviously, it's some kind of powerful deity summoned through Aether. That just might make it that just might make it a summon, essentially. That might not make it a deity, necessarily. In theory, in this setting, gods exist, but they speak in mysterious ways. Some might even say that if the Morrigan has a physical form at all, it can't be a god, because that means it can die. But a strong ethereal creature in the setting, I've already told the players about this, like strong enough ethereal creatures can be pact keepers and give you power. There's like strong fae, like fae kings and queens, like Oberon. I never figured out. I think it's Oberon. Can like people like that can make a pact with a mortal and turn them into a sorcerer, or make them become a warlock. You can be like a warlock for a fae, and that's like a physical person. You can technically, there's warlocks and paladins in the Inquisition, and it's because they fight for the priestess, and the priestess supplies them with magical power. So if they can do that, then yeah, the Morrigan fucking can. And it's just interesting to think about. I just think that that's really cool. I don't know if anybody's actually going to take the Morrigan up on that offer. I don't expect anybody to, but it's fun to think about that. But that was kind of the end. The Morrigan is like, I think it's time that we go now, and like flies up into the sky, but everyone kind of begins to float up with them, like levitating essentially, and there's a few flashes of lights. But in the last few seconds, they see that there's an army off in the distance that bears the same flags as the Dark-Eyed Prince that destroyed the first starting town, Fort Dolahan. And so they see those sigils off in the distance, marching not towards Kirith. I think this was a bit of a confusion. Is that just because they saw the army, everyone just assumed they must be going towards Kirith, but they weren't. The army was going directly towards the Hag's lair. It was going directly towards the Elden Woad tree, whatever it is, whatever you want to call it. It was going towards the Morrigan and the rest of the party. It was making a beeline directly towards them, not towards Kirith, not towards Conwick. It was coming directly towards them, and it was like 10 minutes, 20 minutes of marching away. Like, it was close. And I do think that was a little bit of confusion, just because everyone, I think, safely assumed, like, well, they destroyed Fort Dolahan last time, so they must be going towards Kirith this time. But no, it was not going towards Kirith. It was going directly towards them. And then they were teleported away, and they are back at the front of the forest where they first entered in. They're out of the dungeon. They're out of the instance dungeon, and the Morrigan is nowhere to be seen. Except Azarine does have those tarot cards, so I guess she does have proof that happened. But now the party's sort of like, whoa, damn, what do we just talked to a god in theory? What are we going to do? I guess we have to go back and tell Captain Copperbell that we killed the hags. And like at first Gareth was like, oh no, we have no proof that we did it. But I kind of like out of character told him, I was like, Copperbell trusts you. If you say you did it, then you did it. Like you're a fucking captain of the Inquisition as far as Copperbell's aware. He doesn't think that you're going to lie about that sort of thing for 1,000 gold pieces. So that's where we left off. It was pretty fun. It was pretty interesting. I don't know what the party's gonna do. Everyone was kind of like, at the end, everyone was like, "Oh, I'm going through some kind of like turmoil, some kind of internal crisis of identity." And there was this kind of moment, and I wasn't exactly sure why. I kind of understand Gareth and Brewkild. On the next episode of St. Joan, Brewkild McFucking loses it. Yeah, why is Brewkild gonna McFucking lose it? I don't actually think I understand why it is Brewkild is upset. I don't know what she's upset about. Maybe I do. Maybe. I feel like everybody has cause to be like, whoa, that was weird. We just we killed a bunch of hags, which is something we've never done. Yeah, I mean, you can DM me. I don't care. If it's a secret, then by all means DM me. Otherwise, it might be a fun discussion topic right here and now. But yeah, I mean, obviously, I think everybody has something to talk about, just in the sense of like, oh my goodness, we possibly met a deity, we just committed murder. No, it's not a secret, but I didn't want to derail your stream. No, we kind of, the summary is over. There's all that's really left now is to kind of look back on what I thought was cool and what I thought wasn't cool. Though I kind of did that as I did the summary at the same time, and so yeah, no, I'm free for many topics. I don't know if we're going to play on Thursday yet. I haven't decided. Thursday is Halloween, so it might be weird. I don't know if people have plans. I might have plans. I'm not quite sure yet. I'll have to consider. I was going to spend tonight basically thinking about it, and then hopefully deduce that tomorrow or tonight. But now's a good time as any to mention, like, it is Halloween, so I don't really know what's going to happen. But I think we'll still play, to be honest. I don't know if I'm going to have anything better. Nah, bro, we D&Ding. Yeah, it's kind of what I kind of anticipated. I don't think we're going to D&D as long as we usually do, but... Alright, yeah, it seems like nobody has any other plans. I'll ask a few other people before I commit one thing or another, and also check my own plans. I am working at the radio this week, so I do have to be a little bit more cognizant. If I was working my retail job, I wouldn't give a fucking flying shit, but because I'm actually doing, like, my career job, I have to, like, be more cognizant of what time I'm going to go to bed and stuff. What the fuck is your secret, Punk Chops? What the fuck is Brewkild going to be torn up about? I know Gareth is going to be torn up because he's met the physical embodiment of justice, and it does not have anything to do with the Inquisition, so he's kind of like, well, fuck. I thought the Inquisition was the embodiment of justice. But other than that, I mean, Azrene is still kind of on this whole, like, what is the sea wyvern thing? And the Morrigan kind of had some answers to that, so she's kind of like, let's see why. She's kind of like calculating that stuff. Basically, the start of her adventuring was all easy peasy lemon squeezy-ish. Oh, this is the first time that she's had a run-in with, like... Yeah, I get it. Yeah, I get it. This was the first dungeon. This was the first, like, in my mind, dungeons in D&D are like where the shit hits the fan, where like your tests, it's the real test of character, both in story related reasons and in like combat related reasons. And she ate a whole ass lightning bolt to the face. Yeah, she ate that lightning bolt like a fucking champ though. Like, she did not go down. I was so proud of her. I was so fucking proud of her. Even Gareth went down to 1 HP. Brewkild was fine. No, I'm just teasing. But yeah, it was pretty it was tough. It was level appropriate tough is what it was. Like I said, after they beat out I'm glad it was scary on paper. I'm glad that I still kept up the tension, and that because the hags still wanted to appear as like deadly and scary and maybe scare the players off and maybe like get in their heads and psychologically be like, you're still in the shits, you're not out of it yet. But like once those hags used like all 3 lightning bolts, they were done. Basically escaping Dolham was difficult and gross, but not bad. But this was disgusting and violent and terrifying and really, really painful. Yep, this is Brewkild's first experience as like actually adventuring, actually like dungeon delving and stuff like that, and actually being like, oh yeah, first real case of like lives on the line. I always knew that the party was going to come out of that on top, but I knew it was going to be hard and that they were going to have to use all of the skills at their disposal and probably pop a few potions. Like it wasn't just going to be a free fight. Bogart Redcap was a free fight. Bogart, just by showing up, you guys beat Bogart Redcap. But the Hags was like, you got to actually put the work in to win. And so, yeah, this is definitely the first time the party really had that situation. And I might give her a scar from that lightning bolt. And it's like, what the fuck? Lightning, that's strong magic. And I'm definitely not going to pull out magic users all that often. This is, low magic world. It is still a low magic world. Hags are not the usual enemies that people will fight. In like that was a strong, really weird creature, and like people that toss magic like that are not gonna be common. They're that sort of person, that kind of being is definitely like final boss of a dungeon material is like reserved for that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, if that like lightning bolt caused a scar, I would not be surprised that this is like her first encounter with that level of pain. She shouldn't be here. She shouldn't be here. You all train soldiers and fighters, adventurers, people with a purpose, and she isn't. Just a pampered noble, and she belongs in silk beds and fancy dresses. If only life were fair, Brookild. If only life were fair. Like, she's at a point where she might literally chuck the codex at Gareth. Yeah, it'll be interesting RP stuff. It's kind of where Gareth has to. Gareth and Brookild are kind of like in the. For Valerie, I don't want to say it's business as usual, but for Valerie and Azarine, they are adventurers and they have seen a lot of weird stuff, and so I don't want to say that this is not unusual for them. This is still wildly unusual, but the idea of like the law's not on our side, we're fighting for ourselves, and things that will happen that we kind of have to just weather is something that Azarine and Valerie are probably used to, and Gareth is used to it in another extent, in the sense of like I have order. Like, I have a chain of command, so I can always weather these things if I have a chain of command, but he doesn't have that now, so it'll be interesting to see how he takes it. Brookild is definitely like a fish out of water, though, for this sort of thing. So it'll be interesting to see how she handles it moving forward and adapts. Did I ever share with you of my Apache gunship? I don't know what the hell that is. I don't know what that means. But yeah, that's where we kind of left off. It is 6 o'clock. Unfortunately, I am gonna have to end it soon. I had half a mind to jump back into my my tabletop homebrew system where like we actually have roles like tank and DPS and healer, or rather support. I mean, the story of my Kitsune Veg. Oh yeah, you did last time. I remembered it. So, yeah. But I don't know. I was thinking about doing this, but yeah, it's getting late. I still have some stuff to do. I got business to attend to, but I organized this list of different cards for the system. So like I have the stuff that's focused on taking aggression as a tank, and like the cool maneuvers that you can do as a DPS, and the spells you have access to, and buffs you have access to as a support. But we're working on it. I'm really liking it so far. It's shaping up. I have a nice little little diagram there that I'm pretty proud of. Enjoy. Yeah, it was cool. It was a link, right? Yeah, it was just a link in there. Yeah, I gave it a once over. It was pretty nice. I did enjoy. All right, yeah. I'm sorry. I think I have to go soon though. We'll probably do. I don't know. I've been trying to hit 2 streams every week. Next time is gonna be the. If you guys are still interested in learning more about this tabletop RPG I'm designing, that is just that actually is focused on roles, the idea of a tank, a healer, a DPS, and stuff like that, then come back for that. I've been sourcing the chat for like suggestions on what kind of cards we put in, what kind of abilities and skills that we put in, and I've organized it, and now we're gonna get to the point where I think I'm gonna need to switch over to a Word doc to really get the nitty gritty, like literal number stuff involved. And right now I've got some more thinking to do, but that's gonna be stream 2. Stream 1 is gonna be these postmortems, and then stream 2 is gonna be the like homebrew stuff. Maybe we'll play a game. Who knows? This is Twitch. Maybe we'll get wild and we'll play a video game. Who knows? I've been interested in the duck game, or the goose game rather. Maybe I'll stream me grinding in my preferred MMOs of choice, and then I'll just talk over it. I don't feel like MMOs are inherently a fun game to watch, but I feel like they're good talking games. So maybe we'll do that. But in the meantime, farewell. Thanks for coming. Hope to see you guys again next time. Yeah, have a good night. Treat yourselves right. Happy Halloween if I don't see you guys before then. Be safe. Goodbye.